my old friend Jim Beaver. Jim,
Hi, Vicky.
it really is good to see you, Jim.
You too. You too.
You,
I
you
missed
know,
you.
we've go back like 15 years, I realized.
Yeah, how is that possible? It seems like yesterday we met.
I believe that you were in my living room with Howard Kalin the first time.
I was. The first time I ever met you in person, we were all singing Happy together with the guy who wrote it.
We were. That was pretty crazy. And
Yeah.
those days of having the salon in my living room and all the women and eating food and hanging out, I really miss that. Life has changed for me a lot since the pandemic. Has your life changed?
If you count it going upside down and spilling all over the floor a few times, yeah. Yeah. It's been from 2019 until this year, it's been craziness all over the place.
Is there anything okay, is there anything good that's come out of it for you?
Well, let me think.
Because I'd be hard pressed to think about it. I have a couple,
Yeah,
yeah.
I there are some awful things that are over, so that's good.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that's good.
but uh, and I mean, uh, I've I've been able to get a fair amount of work done on projects that I work on myself. Not not I don't mean acting, but
Okay, so
uh,
let's go right to it. Superman, where are we at with George Reeves? What's going on?
oh, I'm working away at it. It's just this book is going to be this thick, I think.
Okay, for those who don't know, how long have you been working on this,
Oh,
Jim?
don't ask me that. I've
Oh,
been
come on.
working. Okay, okay.
You're the only person that's worked on a book longer than I have. So,
Jimmy Carter was president when I started. But let me be very clear. There have been days and weeks and months and not years, but there have been days, weeks, and months that I have not been able to work on it. So
of
um,
course.
a few years after I started, I stumbled into another career you may know something about, and I've been fairly busy with that.
Oh,
So,
fairly busy, fairly successful.
you know, well, so, but it's been ever since the uh, particularly the strike that happened last year. Ever since then, it's been fairly slow for all of us who make film and TV. And the upside of that is that I've been able to write a lot. So it's moving along. It's moving along. I'm
So, okay, so tell us from what I recall, this started out as an assignment to write a magazine article on
Yeah,
George Reeves. Is that correct?
that's right. I was writing for the magazine of the National Board of Review in New York called Films and Review. And the editor asked me if I wanted to write a piece on Reeves, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds interesting." And then I started digging. The more I dug, the more I thought, this is this is either too little to do anything with, or it's way too much. And I went with the way too much side of things, and have been researching for many, many, many years. But uh, uh, about 3 years ago, I started the actual writing, and it's it's a complex kind of situation because on one hand, you've got people who have sort of an idle curiosity about who this guy was who played Superman on TV in the 50s. And then you've got people who want to know what color underwear he wore. Uh, they want every single detail. And I'm trying to find the balance between those. And I think I'm leaning much further toward the people who want lots of detail. Um,
It sounds well.
so
Also, Jim, was it a myth, or I seem to recall when I was a kid that the rumor was that George Reeves jumped out a window Well, the silly myth was to see if he could fly. I mean, that was like the
Right,
silliness,
right.
right? But
Yeah.
but
That's an urban legend. Yeah.
that's an urban legend.
Yeah.
Did he commit suicide?
I believe so. Yeah. Um, I mean, there's a lot of people who don't, but in my experience, most people who have any kind of either connection or great feeling for someone who dies that way tend to reject the notion that they could possibly have felt bad enough to do that.
How
Um,
did he die?
a gunshot wound to the head. Um, and I didn't believe it myself when I started, but I believe the forensic and psychological evidence is far too solid to come to any other conclusion.
Well,
And
how could it be anything other than I mean, people think he was murdered.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, he was coming out of a kind of wacky love triangle, and one of the partners was not very happy about no longer being part of that relationship. And so there's there's plenty of stuff to spur speculation.
Mhm.
But when you get down to the nitty-gritty, when you get down to, okay, this happened at this moment, and this happened at this distance, and this happened at this time, um, I think it's plain that in a moment of highly inebriated impulse, he did something he might not have done 5 minutes earlier or later.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's not something you're ever going to be able to prove without beyond a reasonable doubt.
No,
No.
I'm convinced,
Mm.
and it took a lot to convince me, but I am convinced that he was in a bad enough place that you add a lot of alcohol and a certain amount of emotional uproar around that time, um, and it happened because of the confluence of that time and that circumstance. Um, people, there's this famous meme going around of all these famous people who committed suicide, and they're all smiling and upbeat. And it says, depression doesn't always look like depression. Um, and There are a lot of people who will tell you that Reeves was just happy-go-lucky and everything was great, and he couldn't possibly have done this. But
Mm.
we all have probably had someone that we know of or knew who nobody could have thought was in a place mentally to do this,
Mhm.
but did.
Mhm.
Um, because smiles hide a lot. And I'm doing it right now. Uh,
Well, I don't think Robin Williams is somebody that anyone would have considered
no,
would have gone that way, right?
right, right.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I suspect that there are people who were very, very close to him who
Right, sure.
might not have been surprised. And for everybody who told me that George Reeves was too happy, too outgoing and ebullient in his life, I've got just the same number of people who tell me he was miserable. So, um, what it comes down to, I think, is the simplest answer is usually the truthful one. And there's just too much evidence to suggest that this was a momentarily deliberate act. Um, but
Right.
as
Tony
you
is
say,
saying here that some think he was murdered. Read Hollywood Kryptonite. Yes, Tony, but believe me, Jim has read that and everything else. And you're talking to someone who is an expert on the subject.
well,
Well,
I'll tell you about Hollywood Kryptonite. The hardback edition is dedicated to me.
is that so?
Yes, and
That I brought that up.
the paperback edition is not dedicated to me. They removed it because I had so many arguments against what they wrote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's
Uh,
brilliant.
George's friend and co-star Jack Larson
Mhm.
called the book Hollywood Kryptonite. Uh, so I'm not going to say anything more than I have huge problems with that book and the uh, perspicacity and the accuracy of it.
Mm.
So
I love that. And I let it be said also that it's not that Jim is someone that doesn't finish things. You are a voracious finisher, and you have many. You finished your first book on Sterling Hayden. You have finished an inordinate amount of articles. You finished plays. You finished teleplay. Tons of work for television. This particular work is the thing that is the thing.
it's the magnum opus. Now, whether
It's the
anybody's going to
magnum
think it
opus.
is a whole other thing. But I decided a long time ago I was going to write the book I wanted to read. And
Ah.
um, and that and I think there are plenty of people who will want to read it. Maybe not the whole wide world, but I don't need the whole wide world to read it. I want people who want to know about it to read it.
Now,
And
is this something that did your fascination start when you were tasked to write this article? Or, I mean, as a
oh,
kid, Superman was everything. There
yeah,
was not a day I did not watch Superman.
yeah, I was the same way. I was I flew, to coin a phrase, home from school every day uh, to uh, to watch it. I had the lunch boxes, I had the comic
Oh,
book, and I had pictures of George Reeves,
mhm.
that I sent away for. And I was particularly fascinated because I was 8 years old when he died, and and for so many kids my age, it was a big question because you don't really understand a lot at age 8, and the question was always, well, I wouldn't kill myself if they let me play Superman, as if that were the real sum of it. Uh, and so I was always fascinated. I collected magazine articles and newspaper articles about just trying kind of to understand as a kid. But by the time I was asked to write a magazine article on him, I was long past my comic book days, and
Right.
I was uh, I was busy trying to become a professional actor. I'd done a little, but I had written some stuff, not on Sterling Hayden, but on John Garfield. Uh,
John Garfield, I'm sorry.
yeah, and I had written about the time I started this book. I had published my first book on John Garfield, and uh,
And okay, so how did your first career was as a writer, um, well, not as an actor. Well, you were a
well, I mean, I
Marine
was
before you,
acting in college before I ever wrote anything.
and it did spark your passion as soon as you did it, as I recall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for both of them, I mean, the first, the minute the curtain went up, the first play I was ever in, before anybody said a word, and I had the first word,
What play
I,
was that, Jim?
the miracle worker. I had 6 lines. I was the doctor, and before I ever spoke, I had two thoughts. Holy cow, this play doesn't start until I talk. And B, this is what I'm doing the rest of my life. Uh, it was not exactly that way with writing because for me, unlike acting, writing is hard.
Oh, thank you. It is, right?
Yeah. I mean, the famous expression, I think, I want to say Red Barber, the sports writer, said, writing is easy. You just stare out the window until drops of blood come out of your forehead. Um, it's I love having written.
Yeah. Okay, but so what drew you to writing? What was the first, do you remember? Well, I
The
don't want to
first
say
thing,
what was the first thing you published because that's
yeah,
it starts before that.
yeah,
What
yeah, yeah.
where'd your
Uh,
passion start?
Well, I had, in my high school yearbook, my senior year, they asked us what we wanted to do in the future. And taking my cue from Sterling Hayden, I said, I want to buy a schooner and sail around the world writing. Well, I hadn't written anything yet, except a couple of short stories in ninth grade. And, but it seemed a romantic life. Well,
Mm.
yeah, right. Um, but
Oh, thank God Sterling Hayden factors into the story.
yes, yes. Uh, well, his book Wanderer is my favorite
Mm.
nonfiction book, so
Ah,
that's
there
how
we
he
go.
factors into my life. He was a great influence, not so much as an actor, but as a writer and as a man.
Mhm.
But
Did you know him?
no, no,
Okay.
no. His son and I are Facebook friends, but that's about as
Mm.
close.
Mm.
Um, I early in college, a friend of mine wanted to direct a play for an assignment, and he wanted to do an O. Henry story, but it didn't exist in play form. And he asked me if I would write this short story up as a play. And I did, and I thought, well, that was kind of fun. And then
Were you trained? How did you know how to transform this short story into a play? Did
I
you
didn't,
study it? You
I
didn't.
didn't. I just, well, I was acting by that point in college. I was doing
Mhm.
plays, and I was reading them voraciously. So I
Okay,
just
so you were in Oklahoma. As I recall, you were born in Wyoming, moved to Texas, but went to school in Oklahoma. Is this correct?
Yeah, I grew up in Texas,
Mhm.
and then I went in the service. And when I got out, for a couple of non-educational reasons, I went to school in Oklahoma. Uh,
Non-educational. What were the non-educational reasons?
well, uh, one of them was a girl,
Of
uh,
course.
and the other was my cousin was going to school there, and he asked if I wanted to come up there and go and room with him. And that all just seemed cool. And I had a history of showing up at schools because of certain girls and then them getting engaged a week later. And that's pretty much what happened here. So, but
Did you start school? I know you were a Marine for a period of time. You didn't just do your short term.
well,
You upped it.
I did 3 years and then I did another 5 years in the reserves.
So
So,
you were in school while you were in the reserves? Is
yeah,
that how that worked?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. So, I got out of high school and went straight into the Marines.
And
Um,
tell us, Jim. I know the story, but tell everybody why you joined the Marines, Jim.
because you mean the short version or the long version? The short version
Well,
is I was
there's a
an
good
idiot.
version. There's a good version.
My three or four, five closest friends were all a year older than me. I was kind of the runt of the litter simply because I was a year younger. They all graduated from high school the year before me, and four of them went into the Marine Corps. And
Was this when everyone was getting drafted? Or what was
yeah,
going on? Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
did you have a number?
No, I was in the Marine Corps before I was old enough to have a draft card.
Wow.
I went in at 17.
Wow.
and and you had to be 18 to register for the draft. So I didn't have a draft card till after I got out. Uh,
Wow.
so I was still stuck in my with one more year of high school when these guys went in, and uh, and the full year I was in high school, they were writing me letters that basically said, uh, uh, "We were nuts. Whatever you do, don't join the Marines." So being the runt of the litter and having something I felt I needed to prove, First thing I did when I got out of high school was join the Marines.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. And then I spent the next couple of weeks trying to figure out a way to get out. Uh, but uh, I had faked my way through the physical exam. I had terribly flat feet, and I knew how to hide that fact because I wanted to get in. And then once
Wait, wait. How do you hide the fact that you have terribly flat feet?
you curl your toes when you're standing there, you create an arch when they're examining you. And you
And
know,
everyone else was doing the reverse thing. They
everybody
were
else was
trying to
doing
make
the
themselves
reverse.
look
Yeah.
like they had the flat feet.
Yeah. Or worse,
Right.
Uh, so I and then, once I got to boot camp and found out how joyful that was, I was telling everybody who would listen that I had flat feet, and nobody would listen. So I did my 3 years and then went into the reserves and
And
went.
so now, why on earth did you join the reserves after you were
Oh, it was
freed?
part of the deal. There was,
Automatically?
yeah, in those days, I don't know what it is now, but in those days, you had a 6 year obligation to
Oh.
to serve. You sign up. If I had signed up for a 4 year enlistment, I would have spent the remaining two in the reserves. If I had
Mm.
signed up for a 2 year enlistment, I would have had 4 years in the reserves. The difference in my case was that I while I was in the inactive reserves, I decided to go back into the active reserves, which is where you do meetings. You serve in uniform every month, and for a few weeks every summer. And I that was a choice of mine. So I added a couple of years to the overall enlistment, and
Wow.
um, but it was. I know all the things that my buddies were saying about how, whatever you do, don't join. And I understood that, and I did, and all of the things they said I would hate, I hated. All of the things that were harder than I could ever imagine accomplishing in my life were harder than I could ever. But I also really liked a lot of it.
Like
I
what?
I liked the uniforms. I liked the
Mhm.
organization. I
Mm.
liked, I like simple stuff like saluting. I just,
Wow.
I would, a lot of guys would walk around the base, and if they saw an officer coming, they'd do a thing off to the side to get away just so they didn't have to salute. And I thought that was cool. I think there's a little, what's the word, ritual aspect to it that I kind of liked.
Hmm.
And, and I, there were so many things about it that were antithetical to my way of life that I ended up liking. The sense of organization, the sense of being perfectly groomed. I was a slob, still am. But for those years, um, I still line up my shirt front with my belt buckle and my fly, because that's how the Marines do it.
Do you
Uh,
make your bed? Do you make your bed the way you were
Hell no.
taught? Hell no.
No, I mean, there were limits. Uh, and uh, it was miserable and fun. Figure that out. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
and I made some lifelong friends, and I got to see parts of the world besides Texas, and I got to see parts of the world besides the United States.
Did
And
did you do did you entertain when you were in the Marines at all?
I mean, I'm a hugely entertaining fellow,
You weren't in
but
like
no,
the
no, 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 no.
no.
I was a radio man.
You
Uh,
and what did that mean? What did you do as a radio man?
well, I was trained as a radio repairman. I went through
Okay.
a year of electronics school, and they had a weird circumstance in that nobody really failed. They graded on the most extensive curve I have ever seen. I graduated 24th in a class of 25, and everybody graduated because of that curve. And I think back with enormous trepidation and despair as to as to the guys who had to depend on the radios fixed by those of us in the 20s. Uh, because after a year of electronics school, I couldn't change a flashlight battery. I just
Wow.
it wasn't, I mean, I had done an aptitude test where I wanted to be an interpreter. I had studied German and I thought I can be a German interpreter and I can get stationed in Germany and that'll be cool and safe. And, uh, um, and I scored incredibly well on the language test. So they put me in electronics school when I had failed at math. Uh, so There was an old cartoon in the Marine Corps magazine once. Two recruiters are sitting talking, and one of them says, "What bakery school do we put nuclear physicists in?" That was that was kind of my experience. So
Did you ever face combat?
yeah,
You did.
yeah,
You
briefly enough to
and
know I didn't like it. Uh,
wow.
I mean, I was not out in the field as a grunt infantryman, uh, but I was present uh, when my outfit got attacked and
Wow.
fired at and fired back and things like that. But it was my time in Vietnam was about 98.5% boredom. Uh, the uh,
That's good.
the I don't know. A little more excitement would have been nice, but excitement killed people there. So
That's a good way to to have a war, to be in a war, I think.
yeah,
Boredom. Okay, so you did your time in the Marines, you come back to college, and you are in the theater, you're in the drama, you're in the drama department,
yeah.
and acting has so how do you why write? Why why divide yourself that way?
Uh, it it wasn't. It was just a way. It was just a creative outlet. It was something. Now in college, I was acting all the time. I was doing 10 or 12 plays a year, including student one acts and things like that. Uh, and yet, uh, I was fairly new to this creative world,
Mhm.
and it fertilized my instincts. And so even though I mean, I was acting in all these plays,
So
really.
what kind of place were you doing in Oklahoma? Wasn't your school like was it a Jesuit school? Was it a
Oh,
religious school?
the first school I went to in Oklahoma was what is now called Oklahoma Christian University.
This is what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a Church of Christ sponsored school, and
Okay.
that's where I broke into to acting. Uh,
Sorry, I'm laughing, but
that's where I did. Well, they had a great theater department there.
okay.
I did the Miracle Worker. I did Moliere's The Miser. I did Neil Simon's Star Spangled Girl. Uh,
Fabulous.
uh, and right away, whatever talent I had showed itself, and they began to give me really great parts.
Mm.
And but a strange thing happened at toward the end of my first year there. My my one of my theater professors asked me what roles I wanted to play this next year. And I thought, well, okay, that's extraordinary that the theater department is asking one of the students what he wants to do next year. And somewhere in my head, I don't know where this came from, except that I had since my teen years read hundreds, if not thousands, of actors' biographies, and I learned a lot from their mistakes and from their
Hmm.
successes. but something in my head said, don't go to a school where they want to give you everything on a platter.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, I look back on it and I think that is way more thoughtful than I ever was. And yet, uh, I remember it very clearly. And, this was a fairly small school. Um, and I decided that summer to transfer to the state university in basically the same city, which was much larger. And because I thought I need to fight my way to the top, I don't want to have it
I
hand.
need to be a little fish in a big
Yeah.
pond. Yeah.
And I was for quite some time. I played a lot of tiny roles,
Mhm.
delivery guys and messengers and slowly worked my way up to things. And I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed at the other school. Uh, I think my horizons were widened by being at a
Mhm.
bigger school, both
Mhm.
academically and theatrically.
Mhm.
But uh, I think the challenge of having to fight for every part and often fighting very hard and not getting it uh,
Good for you.
was I think that served me immensely.
Good for you. Boy, I remember those. I remember going up for those auditions in college, and the cast list would get posted. And if you didn't get it, it was the most
Oh,
crushing. Oh my
they did
God.
they did at the University of Central Oklahoma. They did uh, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because I recommended the play to them. The theater guys there didn't know it. And I said, you got to read this play because this is a great show for us. And there's a great part for me in it, blah, blah, blah. And they read it and they decided to do it. And I didn't get to play McMurphy.
Were you in it?
I was in it.
Who
I,
were you?
I played Billy Bibbit, the stuttering kid.
That is not a bad part.
It's
And
not
I
a bad
just want
part.
to tell you right now that today, I spoke to my McMurphy. I was Candy Starr in college.
Oh my gosh. Well, I won't tell you my Candy Stars story because it happened off
Well,
stage.
my Candy Star and that my McMurphy, we in college. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, um, uh, Billy Bibbit didn't get lucky, but he came close. Um, but at the time, I was desperate to play McMurphy.
you look the part of McMurphy,
Now,
actually.
maybe. I didn't then. I
Mm.
was 6'1". I weighed 140 pounds. I was a thermometer. Uh,
Our McMurphy looked exactly like Jack Nicholson. He was short and balding and Italian. And he looked just like Nicholson. And it was against type. And it was before the movie came out, just before the movie came out.
Really great fish you got there, Doc. You didn't weigh the chain, did you?
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
so,
So, but
but that
so
kind of
tell
stuff was so
did
wonderful.
did you get to star in something in that bigger school?
Star, not really. I mean,
Probably good for you.
Billy Bibbit
Billy
it's a
Bibbitt's
great
right
role.
there. It's a
It's a great
great
role.
role.
I didn't get a showcase role. I mean, that's a
That's
showcase,
a showcase role.
but it's not the guy the play's about.
Right.
I didn't get anything like I did get it in student productions. I played Jerry in Zoo Story. I got to do a lot of one acts and things like that that were not main stage
Right.
school.
Right.
Uh,
Were
but
you right? Were you writing plays in college
I was writing plays and I wrote that first book on John Garfield while I was in college.
while you were in college?
Yeah, it was a lot more fun than studying.
And it got published
It got published.
while
Yeah.
you were in college.
No, it got published a couple of years after I got out, but I wrote it while I was in college.
Wow.
Yeah. It was my grades reflect that fact.
So now how did you become a journalist? How did you become a magazine writer? How did that happen?
Well, the whole reason I ended up in theater was that coming out of high school, I wanted to be a film historian. I didn't want to be an actor. I hadn't
Okay,
really
you're a
thought.
kid. What do you what's are your parents taking you to the movies all the time? Where
Yeah,
did this
yeah.
passion come from?
As a teenager, age 14, 15, 16, in there, I became, well, addicted is pretty much the only word to move,
Right.
to old movies in particular, but
So
movies.
you're watching like $1 million movie and those kind
We
of
didn't have
things?
that in Texas, but yeah, yeah, that.
So how would you how did you get addicted? Where were
I
you
was,
seeing them?
well, here's the thing. I started I at about age 9 or 10, I became a big John Wayne fan. His movie The Alamo came out, which was a big deal in Texas. And I saw it. It was my favorite movie for years, and I saw it 20 times when it first came out. And and so I started watching everything he was in. And then I started noticing these other actors that were also in his movies, and I started looking for them in other movies. And I started watching them in everything they were in. And that just snowballed. And all of a sudden I had this list of 50 something actors that I would go through the TV guide, and if one of their movies was showing on TV, I would sit up late and watch it. And I got to where I knew who all these people were, and and then I began reading books about them. The first one I remember was a book by Richard Gaiman uh, called Bogart, and it was about Humphrey Bogart. I'd never even seen a Bogart film when I read this movie. I
You're
read the book.
kidding.
But I read the book and I went, I got to see all this guy's movies. And it was a very rewarding decision.
But in
And
those days, it was really hard because there was no way to go see the movies.
it
They
was
had
just
to,
whatever was on television.
right,
If it
right.
showed up on television, you could see it. If it didn't show up, you couldn't.
Mhm.
They didn't even have revival houses, really,
Right,
certainly not in Texas. I mean,
right.
you're talking to a guy who didn't know what a bagel was until he was 26. So, uh, the idea that they had movie theaters specializing in things from the 30s in Dallas was just not happening. So it was all television, and uh, but the more I read and the more I watched, the more I got interested in writing about the people who made movies.
Mm.
That's what I wanted to do when I got out of the service. But in 1971, 72, they did not, maybe in New York and LA, they had film history courses, but not at Oklahoma Christian College, Edmond, Oklahoma. Uh, so I
We
signed,
didn't have film history at the U of A in 1973 either. We didn't have that.
yeah,
No,
I signed up for theater classes. I thought this is kind of
exactly.
close. It's kind of close.
Hmm.
And my roommate was a theater major, and he asked me to work with him on his audition for theater, the campus theater company. And I did. And A, that was enormous fun. And B, they asked me to join. So, so I ended up in the movies, and he ended up doing life in the New Mexico pen. So,
Oh no. God.
and
All right.
thereby hangs a tale.
We're going to get into your whole career, but I have to say, because I see her on here, and I just have to tell you. So my trainer, Stantonay, his wife, Tammy, is such an enormous, I told you this, is
Mm.
such an enormous fan of yours. She has watched Supernatural all the way through. I like half a dozen times, like the whole way through the whole series. And I just read, I think on Facebook today or on Twitter or something, that you're watching it for the first time. Is
Yeah,
that so?
yeah. I mean, in terms of, I mean,
But the whole thing though.
I've seen many episodes, but there are many, many more episodes that I have never seen. Um, I've only really watched the interesting ones, i.e., the ones I was in. Uh,
Yeah, but I also heard you say that how great the acting, that you're noting how great the acting is, and
Oh
that
my
you're
God.
not even upset with yourself, that you're even enjoying yourself, which is a big thing for someone to say, because it is hard.
Oh, it's not hard for me. I love watching. I really do. I hate it when I'm bad, but I really love watching me. I'm not one of those guys who goes, "Oh God, no, I'm not going to watch anything I'm in." I'm like, "Okay, what did I do wrong there? What did I do right there? Oh, yeah, that moment worked good. They caught that." I'm fascinated by me, in at least in that sense.
Well, I love
But
that.
that's
So, but
what's happening. That is what's happening. I am watching this, and I'm watching. We were watching an episode last night, my daughter and me, and I was watching Jensen Ackles in this very emotional sequence, and I went, "Oh my gosh, if he had been who he is now, when I was 16 years old, he'd have been on that list of mine of favorite actors
wow,
that I was watching
wow.
everything he was in because he's so damn good."
I'm embarrassed to say I've never seen Supernatural, and we're gonna start binging. And Tammy said it is literally her comfort show, if you could call horror a comfort show.
Yeah, well, it's there are my daughter's got a pillow that she uses for only for one purpose, and that's to cover her face with during certain scenes.
Well,
So,
I love horror. So does Snuffy. We're starting it tonight. We're
okay.
supernatural. We're on a supernatural
Well,
binge.
it doesn't get terribly interesting until the end of the first season, which is when
Okay.
I
Okay, so
I'm
let's,
kidding.
and Supernatural though, for all your roles, for Justified, for Deadwood, I mean, you've done so much incredible work, and we're going to talk about some of the newer things that you're doing, which, be positive. You worked with my someone very, very close to me is wardrobe on that show, Craig Ames. I
Oh,
think
yeah,
he
yeah,
dressed you. Yeah, Craig is
yeah,
like the closest
yeah.
person to
I
one of
mean,
the
not
most,
literally dressed me, but
but
he gave me clothes to wear.
he gave you clothes to
He's
wear.
nice, but he wasn't that nice.
Hey, but you worked on Be Positive recently, but Greg's going to rehab.
Yeah,
You,
it's
that hasn't come out yet. What,
it's in post-production. It's
and tell us a little bit about that.
it's a little independent film.
You have a big part in a little independent film. Yeah.
Yeah, fairly big, you know.
Yeah.
It's uh, it's a comedy about a kid who uh, has who kind of fakes a drug problem in order to get sent to rehab so that he can pull off an escapade. And
Interesting.
I'm the kind of sort of hippy dippy head of the rehab place. So it's a fun piece. I mean, I haven't seen it, but worked on it this last summer, and I don't know when it's coming out, but
That you the Rock and Doris try to write a movie. You've got that coming, or it
yeah, that
came. That came. That's already out.
well, it's not doesn't have a distributor yet. It just
Oh,
played the
okay.
Palm Springs Film Festival, and that's it's a comedy by my friend Michael Schlesinger. Uh, and a shout out to him. He's in the hospital right now with uh,
Sorry.
distressing situation, but he's a very funny guy, and he's a huge fan of old style comedies. And I've done one or two for him before. This one is kind of his attempt to do um, uh, a kind of 60s Rock Hudson Doris Day comedy mashed together with a 30s old dark house comedy. And it's a remake of a thing called Seven Keys to Ballpate, uh,
Oh,
the famous old. But this is with wacky puns and wordplay, and it's silliness. I mean, there's a robbery that's broken up by a guy in a gorilla suit. So, it's
it's
uh
interesting to see you doing so much comedy, and you did Third Rock from the Sun for a couple of years. So are you in it when you're doing more comedy, is your life lighter than when you're doing things like Deadwood and Supernatural and Justified and
I don't think
not necessarily?
I don't think so. I mean, here's the thing. Uh, if you add up every episode I've done and count them separately, and every movie I've done, it's a little over 500 things. And I can count the times I wasn't having fun on less than one hand.
I love that.
So it doesn't really, I really love drama. I
Mhm.
really love comedy. Um, uh, and no, I don't think it's any different. I mean,
No, I just mean when you come home, when you leave the set
no, I know what
and
you're
you
saying.
come home, is life lighter when you're doing comedy all day and you're laughing on set? Well, you laugh on set when you're doing drama too, though, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah,
Yeah, you
because
do.
we're, there's
Yeah.
always clubs and people joking around and having a good
Mm-hmm.
time. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had moments where I play the most horrendously dramatic, tear-jerking scenes, and the moment somebody yells cut, somebody moons you. You know, uh, it's it's not it's all work until they yell cut. And
So
uh,
let's talk about this supernatural phenomenon for a minute, because it's, I would assume, the hugest culty thing that you've done that
oh
people
my
go
God.
bullshit over, and with conventions and autograph signings and people
Yeah.
recognize you and
Yeah.
all of that stuff that goes with that. um does that make it more fun? Does that make it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I go to historically I've gone to about 6 or 7 or 8 fan conventions a year, and I've always enjoyed them. I've really enjoyed meeting fans, and they treat me like I am what I am not, and that's somebody special.
Oh,
So,
Jim.
no, no, I mean there are good people all over the world, and nobody treats them like they're good people. They treat me like I'm good people, whether I am or not. That's all I'm getting at. I enjoy the interaction. I really dig it. There's nothing like walking into a room with 1,000 people and have them happy you showed up.
Yeah.
Uh, this next year, I'm scheduled for 3 or 4 times as many conventions.
Wow.
And I'm very excited and very wary because they're exhausting. And I'm
Mm.
116 years old, and it's
And you have to be on all the time.
well, yeah, I at the last one I was at, somebody saw me backstage and they said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "My smiler's broke." Uh, it just, sometimes it just wears out. Um, and not that I don't enjoy it, not that I don't stay on all the time, because people have paid to be there.
Yeah.
Me, I have been on that side of the table. I went to things like this, such as they were when I was a kid.
Did
And
you?
yeah, yeah. Um,
Like for what?
well, I mean, usually I was going looking for things to buy, like movie stills and things like that.
Uh-huh.
But I met one of the guys who played Tarzan, Gordon Scott, at a thing. And to me, that was, I mean, I didn't cry or anything, but I was like, holy cow, I'm in the same room.
Yeah.
And uh, that, I collected autographs when I was a kid in the mail. I had a whole wall of my room when I was 16 covered in autographed photos. There's
Wow.
still a binder in my office. Uh, I've been on that side of the table. I get it. Uh, it's I'm always going to be welcoming because I know how that feels, and I know how it makes me feel on this side of the table. Uh, but I get real tired.
Yeah.
I get really tired, much more so than I do acting.
Yeah.
It's when
Yeah.
I'm acting, I don't have to smile. And the
You
smile,
and you also have breaks, right? They also say
oh,
cut, and there's no cut when you've got all
well,
those
yeah,
people
no.
waiting for you.
So I learned the first couple of conventions I went to, I would sit there writing novels on people's photos for 9 straight hours. And I thought I'm doing a big favor for everybody by being completely available. What I didn't realize was people were standing in line for 9 hours.
Right.
And I finally learned that it's much better to say hi, write my name and their name, and talk for 10 seconds and let them have that moment, let me have that moment, and get everybody through, because I wouldn't stand in line 10 minutes to talk to me.
Well, 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 I'm going to suggest that we have coffee sometime soon. And
Yeah.
I'm going to invite my friend Tammy to come, and we're going to sit and we're going to have lunch or coffee.
Well,
And
that'll put an end to her fandom right there.
no, Tammy, you heard it here. I invited Jim to come have lunch with us or coffee with us. All right, so let's go back though. So you're in college, you're doing this, you're acting, you're writing. How do you break through and start to really make a living at this?
Really good question that I'm still trying to answer.
Wow.
I got out of college at 20, a little before 25, age 25. I was 39 before I made a living at it.
Get out of here.
Yeah,
This is hopeful for everybody out there.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I made some money here and there, but making a living, I was
so
30.
what did you do to make your living during those years?
I I worked at Frito-Lay making corn chips.
I love them.
I drove a taxi. I um I took care of a paraplegic woman
Wow.
in her house. I hung Venetian blinds in apartment buildings. I was a maintenance man for a tennis club. I was a projectionist, a movie projectionist. Um, and I'm probably a few other. Oh, I tended bar. I waited tables. Um,
And so what was the role that turned that around for you?
well, I had been doing theater, and I had been.
And we know how much money you make doing that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I could buy and sell a donut. Um, I I actually, it's a complicated question because even though acting was my foremost goal, I broke into the business as a writer. I have a
Right.
play that I think you saw the second production of in 2015
Yes, I did.
that was done previously 30 years earlier, and which got me. Um, it was very successful critically and audience wise, and it got me a big agent writing television. And so that's where I broke in terms of making a living.
How did writing a theatrical play get you a television agent?
There was a very successful television writer named Bill Wood, who is still one of my close friends. He's in his 90s now, but uh, he was busy writing television at the time, and he was a member of our company at Theater West, and he was a big champion of mine. And he had a really good literary agent who hated theater, and Bill browbeat him into coming to see my play Verdigris. And
Browbeat them.
and
And you, as I recall, you weren't in the original production. You
I
just
wasn't.
okay.
I wasn't.
I
I was
when I saw it, you were,
yeah.
and yeah. Okay.
The original production, I was
Mhm.
standing out in the lobby beforehand, and Bill introduced me to this agent who said, "I hate theater. This better be good." When the play was over, I met him in the lobby again, and he said, "I'd like to represent you."
Wow.
And he was
That
one
gave
of
me
the owners.
goosebumps.
He was one of the owners of one of the biggest agencies in town at the time. And
Wow.
I instantly started getting work writing television.
Did you know how to write television?
Uh-uh. They just gave me a
Oh,
bunch
that
of scripts, and I basically copied them and changed the names. Uh,
wow.
no,
So, and you were writing for like Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which I believe you were nominated for
what they used
an
to call the ACE Award or the Cable ACE Award. Yeah, my first script was nominated. Um,
wow.
it was called The Initiation, and Marion Ross was in it. And
I
uh,
love Marion. Marion
yeah,
did my living room. I love
yeah,
Marion. Yeah. She
I
said, she said, it was her birthday. It was both of our birthdays, and we gave her a cake, and she said, I'm 90, damn it.
oh man, she was a hoot. Um,
So you got nominated writing your very first television script that you did
yeah.
not go to school to learn how to do, that you just sat down and did.
Well, I'd certainly read hundreds of scripts and screenplays. Um, and I do remember sitting down with other people's scripts and going, okay, the first act is about this many pages long, and the second act is about this many pages long. So I've got to kind of write to that, and I've got to kind of write to where there's a break or a cliffhanger or something for commercial. And uh,
Wow.
I mean, it was a kind of a mechanical thing to me. I went through and broke down other people's scripts to see how to do it.
Wow.
But but I was very, very ignorant, and I tended to turn in scripts that were 10, 15 pages too long, because I thought if you just shrink the margins,
Or if you talk really fast.
yeah. Uh, and I had a couple of scripts rewritten on me because they liked what I wrote, but they were only doing hour-long shows. And I was writing these epics that, and I learned a lot about uh, writing to the budget. My one of my first script for Tour of Duty, which was a Vietnam show on CBS,
Hmm?
my first script for them, I had this humongous helicopter crash and planes and thousands of troops, and they were like, no, 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 no. We might see a piece of the helicopter in the corner, and I said, oh, okay.
So were you writing one-offs, or were you ever
Wasn't on
on
staff.
okay.
I was never on staff. I didn't
Uh-huh.
want to be on staff because I still wanted to act.
Now, were you auditioning for acting roles and getting acting roles during this time?
A little tiny bit, not very much.
Mhm.
I had done because I was by that point I was in a relationship with the woman who became my wife, Cecily Adams,
Mhm.
who worked in the casting business. I was beginning to know a lot of casting people socially, and they were starting to bring me in for things, but I wasn't getting a lot. A little bit here and there, a line or two, but I was certainly not enough to live on. But I was making enough writing television to live on. And
Wow.
then in 1988, there was a huge writer's strike, one of the
Mhm.
longest
Mhm.
they ever had. And I couldn't work as a writer, and and my agents couldn't work as agents to get writing work. So I spent a lot of time just hanging out with them, shooting the breeze about the business,
Mhm.
and at one point, one of them introduced me to a talent agent, an actor's agent for the same agency. And I may have told this story before because it's probably the most famous story in my catalog. Uh, she took a look at me and asked me if I was an actor. And I said, yeah. And she said, are you represented? And I said, no. And she said, well, you might be right for this part in this movie that Norman Jewison is casting. And I was like, wow, okay. And it was a very weird situation. It didn't work the way I understood the business to work because she said, I have a client who has an audition with him tomorrow. But this guy just booked another movie, so he can't do Norman's movie. So what if I stuck you into his audition? I was
Wow.
going with a casting director. That's not how that works, except
Right.
that this was a huge agency. And and I said, okay. And I went in and I got the part, and it was a co-starring part with Bruce Willis in a picture called In Country. And simultaneous with that, the writer's strike ended in such a way that the TV business realized they didn't really need freelance scriptwriters anymore. The staff could write everything because they kind of figured out how to do it in a truncated season. And they went, oh, we can get all the money. And they stopped basically hiring freelance one script
Mm,
writers. And I never made another nickel writing for television.
wow.
And I started acting and I never lost, I didn't have a dip in my income. It was
Wow.
it was very
Wow.
weird. But that movie changed everything. That movie and that play I had written together changed everything.
Wow.
So
Wow.
good movie too. Um,
And
I'm
poor
very
Bruce
proud of
Willis, boy,
it.
his life. Um, so and you've worked so much. I mean, your IMDb is like whoa, 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 whoa. I mean, you've been on so many incredible shows and had big but wait, you were on like Days of Our Lives for like
Yeah.
this. What the hell? I can't picture you in a soap opera. That's just crazy to me.
Well, even harder to picture is I played a priest. Uh, and I mean, I was one of several guys who played Father Jansen on Days of Our Lives, but I think I may have played him longer than anybody else. Um, but that was a drop-in thing. Fran Bascom, the casting director, just called in and said, "You want to play this part?" And I was like, "I'll take anything at this point." And uh, every few weeks or months, they'd call up and say, "Somebody's getting married. We need a priest. Come on in." And
Somebody's getting married.
well, I did. The world of soap operas is very strange. After something like 5 years, I had I had married. I think I'd done five weddings, five funerals, four last rites, and about six baptisms. And at the end of my time there, none of those people was married or dead. So,
Oh my Lord. Um, so so Jim, of all the things you've done, and I think I know the answer to this, what character that you've played for a time has given you the most, have you enjoyed the most?
well, Supernatural fans have heard this probably, but they may not like it.
Like it.
Uh,
Deadwood. It's Deadwood, isn't it?
Deadwood.
Yeah.
It's Whitney Ellsworth in Deadwood, and there are a multitude of reasons for that, and none of them denigrate Supernatural at all.
Okay.
Um, the Deadwood had the richest writing of anything I've done outside of Shakespeare,
Mm.
and I had this glorious character arc that I don't think anybody saw coming. And it was the kind of show, the kind of character that I most love playing. It was a Western. We shot it, we shot the first season during my wife's final illness.
Oh,
And all of and it was a cohesive cast who all loved what we were doing and how the work processed. And it was an unusual work process.
How so?
Different. Well, I mean, it famously got rewritten often the morning of, and and you would stay up all night learning all week, learning these massive speeches, and then come in the next morning and find out they'd been rewritten
Oh my God.
or thrown out and something new was there. And it was daunting. It was terrifying, and it was probably the same way skydiving is. Uh, and
Wait, but do you have a trick for that, Jim, by the way?
well, I didn't. I mean, I came to that as one of those actors who needs the script a week or two in advance. Otherwise, I'm not going to be any good. And it fundamentally changed how I approached that because the only full script for Deadwood I ever saw was the pilot. Uh,
Wow.
um, sorry.
That's
Um,
okay.
okay. Um, the
Well, so how did you learn to fly? What did you do?
uh, I finally realized that I finally realized that David Milch wasn't going to let us die. That even if you just got handed a two-page monologue, they were going to shoot until you got it. And they understood what they were asking of us. And what happened and what we were saying was so good, so rich, so intricate, so poetic.
Wow.
And when somebody says, you can walk out on this tightrope, and I don't care how far out you get or how high up you are not going to fall. You just say, okay, I can do this then.
Wow.
And now, even though I don't always have that level of writing, and I don't always have that level of
Wow.
we're going to shoot until we get it, because that's costly. Uh,
Hmm.
I approach the work much more instinctually now, rather than having to go over it and over it and over it for weeks in advance. If I get the chance, I'll go over it and over it. But if somebody says, we threw out your scene for this morning, we've got a new scene for you, I don't freak out. I do the best I can, and I do it from my gut, from my instinct. And I know that most of the time, the people who have done that to me are going to be there to make sure I get it right.
Wow.
On Deadwood, that was a guarantee.
Wow.
But when you add all of those other things going, it was it was an emotional perfect storm that had one horrible aspect,
What's
my
that?
wife's illness.
Yeah.
That was going on throughout that.
Mm.
Uh, First season, her illness. The second and third season, she was gone. That was horrendous. But everything else was not only the most artistically, creatively satisfying time in my life, it saved my life.
Mm.
And my gratitude to whatever fates gave me that role at that time in my life. And add to that, just prior to getting Deadwood, I had a new baby and I wasn't getting any work. And I thought, I'm going to have to learn to teach school or something
Oh my gosh.
because, I can sleep on people's couches, but I can't ask my kid to.
It doesn't look like there's a break in your IMDb. I mean,
There was a break in the money. I don't know about the IMDb, but I was, I was, I was getting most of the jobs I went out to audition for, but I wasn't
mhm,
getting auditions.
mhm.
And, uh, and I changed agents, and within a week or two, I got Deadwood, and it
Oh,
changed my life forever. Because that's also
wow.
the show that people suddenly had an idea who I was. And that it because of that show, so many other things followed in its wake.
Right.
And I began to get jobs purely because I was on Deadwood.
Right.
Well, Supernatural, I don't think had anything to do with Deadwood. I had done a series called Reasonable Doubts with Mark Harmon
Hmm.
and Marley Matlin
Hmm.
20 years earlier, and the producer of that was now producing Supernatural, and he offered me that. But between those two shows, they are the bed in which the flower of my career has grown, because people know me from one or the other. And I've been on shows where people have said, you're number 8 in our attempt to get everybody on Deadwood onto this show. Uh, so sometimes it's not even work. You just wait for somebody who loves one of those shows to call. And that's for a guy who spent the 14 years after college trying unsuccessfully to eat from acting. Uh,
Wow.
it's been an extraordinary ride and an extraordinary blessing. And between those two shows, I owe I owe my life. So
Wow. And you still, and theater is still a passion, and you just did It's a Wonderful Life. You just did it live
yeah,
for
I mean it gave me a little taste. I hadn't done a play since before the pandemic, and
wow.
and this was just a one night only production.
Ah,
But
wait, I lost you. Wait, wait, wait.
oh,
Wait, I can't find you. Hold on, Jim. I'm like, oh my God.
it's in
Wait,
there
it's in my
somewhere.
earring. I don't know where it is. There it is. Wait. Oy, 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 oy,
This is
oy.
the
No, I'm going.
entertaining portion of the
See, you
show,
can't
folks.
tell what's forward and what's backwards when you're on the screen. That was the first thing you've done since the pandemic, the first theater?
Yeah, yeah. I had I had done The Man Who Came to Dinner just prior to the pandemic, and then I haven't done anything since until last Saturday night. I did It's a Wonderful Life with you and McGregor, and
And so how was that?
it was wonderful. I mean, it was fairly easy. We did it as a radio play. We did it with scripts in our hands, and
Mhm.
it was just one night. It was a huge audience and very successful as a fundraiser, but it wasn't really doing a play, and I'm ready for one of those. I'm ready to do something for a month or two or three or five. And um, I got my fingers crossed. And
I would assume that your days of auditioning are behind you.
no,
Do you, okay, I haven't acted in years, and an agent just found me, and now I'm doing self-tapes. This is the most ridiculously, I mean, there's no rapport. You're not doing there's nobody that you're bouncing off with. You're just doing this into a thing. How are you with this self-tape
I
thing?
hate it. I hate it.
Just,
I know some people like it because you don't have to leave home, and you can do it on your own time. You can do it at 3 in the morning, and you can do it over and over again. I know all the reasons for liking it, but in the what is it, 4 years since it's been the thing,
right.
uh, uh, I have worked in that time. Thank you, all the past jobs that got me work in that time, but I have done probably 40 or 50 self-tape auditions and have never gotten a job from one.
Do you know you are the third actor I know who has worked a shit ton in this business and has said that same thing?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. There's something about being in the room reading live with the producer and director and casting director. And it's not just about the acting. I know I have a number of acquaintances who are certainly they're adequate, reasonably good actors,
Mhm.
but their persona in the room is such that everybody wants to work with them. They
Mm.
don't even care if they're good. I want to hang out with the guy.
Yeah, yeah.
I try to be a little of both. I'd like to be somebody that they want to see this kind of work, but they also want to hang out with me.
Right,
Self-tapes only give you a fraction of one of those,
right.
and I hate them. I've been up for some fabulous parts, and I've gotten to the point where I go, I don't know why I even bother. I don't want to say it's never going to happen, but one of the things that has happened is because they don't have to rent a room or set aside an office space, and they don't have to get a whole bunch of people together at a certain time. Uh, they have vastly increased the number of people they can supposedly look at. They can get 5,000 submissions for a
Oh
role
my Lord.
instead of the 28 that they can fit into a day of auditions.
Right.
Doesn't mean they look at all 5,000. And they may look at the first four and go, here's the guy, let's just go with this and not waste the rest of our week watching
Oh,
these tapes. So,
right.
I mean, I don't have the access to the daily life of a casting director that I used to have. So I don't know all the ins and outs, but uh, from what I hear, it's an overwhelming number of submissions for every single role. And half the time, they really want John Lithgow anyway. And well, they should. And and they're just waiting around to hear back. And so they're looking at tapes from other people just in case Lithgow and Harvey Keitel and Ewan McGregor and 35 other big names say no. So I don't know for sure how it works, but I know it doesn't work for me
So the work that you're getting is from people that you've worked with before, or people who just admire your work who are just making the call.
almost exclusively,
Mhm,
almost exclusively.
mhm.
And uh, and that's great because I happen to be in a position where there are a lot of those people.
That's right.
I've done enough stuff that people recognize and remember because the shows were big. I mean, that's another thing. I could have done this amount of work on shows nobody ever saw.
But it's supernatural and it's Deadwood.
Justified and Breaking Bad and Better Call
Right,
Saul. These are shows that people
right.
remember and talk about and still watch, even though they're all.
That's right. And Dexter. And yeah, you have so many of them.
If everything I had done had been, on the 2000s equivalent of My Mother the Car, uh, I might have a lot of money in the bank, but nobody would know who I was, and
Yeah.
nobody would be giving me jobs because, oh, I just loved you on, Schmick and Schmack Go to Town. Uh, it's
Jim, have you written anything for yourself? Like, have you written one of these like Netflix series for yourself, or
no,
do you think of doing that?
not much anymore. I I I I have ideas for projects. I mean, this book is kind of all consuming, but
Yeah.
I've got a couple of film and or television projects that I would love to see done. But I probably won't. For one thing, the
Mhm.
world is changing, and the stuff I like to write about is not terribly in vogue, particularly for feature films. I don't want to write superhero movies. I'd love for somebody to give me one because I'd like the money, and I think it'd be fun to fly, but uh, but I don't think it's going to happen. But if I'm going to pour what it takes into writing something, it's going to be about something that fascinates me. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, uh, 20 years ago, I pitched a, uh, a historical drama miniseries to HBO, and they were pretty interested, and then they passed on it. It's a true story, and I'm still very excited about it. Well, television has changed in such a way that I keep thinking now's a good time to go back to that. But I don't really have time to write 7 hours of television.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm perfectly willing to give it to somebody good to let them write it. But it's because it's something I'd like to see done. But right now, right
What are you
now,
working on right now?
I'm writing this book, and I'm hoping somebody gives me a job acting. I mean, I've got some. Uh, I've had some people talking to me about picking a play to do, and I'm reading a lot of plays right now. But it's so expensive to do a play unless you're doing unless you got big bucks and you're doing it in New York.
Yeah.
Uh, Doing local theater in LA is prohibitively expensive. What it would the production of my play Verdigris that you saw in 2015, uh, the budget on that would be three times what we did it on. Uh,
Really?
well, a lot of things have happened legally in terms of paying minimum wage for rehearsals that we didn't used to do,
Mm,
things like that. It's just that show has a cast of 11. That's a lot of people on minimum wage for
right.
uh, you know 12, 13 weeks uh,
Yeah.
for for something that takes place in a venue that can barely support itself because people don't come out to the theater enough to small theater to support very many $90,000 productions.
Wow.
But that's what it would take.
Wow.
So, and I don't have $90,000 lying around to do it. And uh, so I'm looking at plays, and I've got a couple of projects that people want me for, but they're still pulling their money together for. And so we don't know if
Do
they'll.
you get, would you go audition for Broadway?
Oh, I just did.
Did you?
Yeah, I just a month or so ago, I had a very exciting and very promising audition for Othello with Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal.
I remember reading something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't get it, but they went with somebody good, and
Ah,
uh, I was very hungry for that because I'm a Shakespeare fanatic,
yes.
and I have yet to do Broadway. It's one of my last bucket list things as an actor, and that would have been a double bucket list thing for me, but it'll come or it won't. Um, but yeah, it's I don't live in New York, which makes it a little harder
Hmm.
because
Although,
they
have
don't.
you seen the new Gladiator?
I haven't.
Okay, for me, I love Denzel. I
Mhm.
love Denzel. But for
Mhm.
me, he was too New York. He was too
Yeah.
modern, and it didn't work. And I wonder if his Othello is going to be that way. He was just too modern.
Yeah. I
And
had I had sort of I don't want to screw up any future chances of working, but I had similar feelings about his Scottish play in the movie. There's a poetry to Shakespeare that is
yes,
absolutely vital,
yes,
and not everybody excels at it. I mean, he's a splendid, magnificent actor.
yes, he is.
Um,
Yes, he is.
but uh, but if they were going to give me a part in Shakespeare on Broadway and he was starring, I would show up for work.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, it seems though to be that you have to be available to audition all the time to get a Broadway show. It would just seem to me that you'd have to always be
well,
available. No?
everything, I mean, that was a self-tape. I did that in the
What?
room I'm sitting in right now.
Stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Uh,
didn't do a chemistry read with actors for that?
nope. Nope.
Wow.
Nope.
That's
Yeah.
scary to me.
It is.
Theater being done that way is scary to me. Wow.
The thing, I'm in an interesting place in that my television credentials, my movie credentials make me a somewhat more viable candidate for good
Sh-
roles in the theater
Sure.
and in New York.
Well,
But it
also, you
hasn't
have a
happened.
lot of theater credits.
Yeah, I've done about
Yeah.
104 plays.
Oh, yeah.
I can find backstage. Uh, but it's uh I don't live in New York. I can make myself live in New York, but they don't want to pay you to live in New York.
Mhm.
They would much rather cast people who are already based there. And that
Right.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Everything's expensive. I fully understand the economics of it. I don't
So, in
drive.
other words, if they were to cast you, they would have to pay for you to live there.
No, they
Oh,
wouldn't pay for
they
me to
would
live there.
not pay for you to live there.
I would have to
You would
get,
have to. I
yeah,
see.
unless, unless some insane person was doing the Jim Beaver story on Broadway, they'd probably pay my hotel bill then, but they'd probably cast somebody else. Uh,
They probably would.
so Denzel, um, but if for something wonderful, I'll do a sublet in New York and
Hell yeah.
do it. I don't. The great thing about where I am now is that I'm old enough. I got my pensions coming in. Secondly, I've had a pretty good career the last 2 decades, and I don't have to take a job,
Hmm.
which means I'm free to take jobs that don't pay all that much.
Hmm.
Um, and which is it's one of the reasons I did Greg's going to rehab. Mainly it was because a friend of mine had written it and was directing it,
Hmm.
but also it didn't matter to me that it was a low budget project that he was
Hmm.
putting together, and he didn't have to worry about paying me, the cost of a house to get me there.
Right.
Um, Nobody has to pay me much of anything uh, to get me to do something good or fun.
Hmm.
Um, so, but yeah, I'd like to do something on Broadway. I'd like to do something in LA. I'd like to do something on television. There's the opportunities don't stop. The only thing that's really changed for me is that auditioning on tape has been very unproductive.
Oof.
But I keep working.
You
If I were a beginning actor now, I think I'd slit my throat.
well, thank you, because I'm basically beginning over again. And
Don't slit your throat.
these self tapes are so awful. They are just so awful. They're just awful.
Yeah, I've
They're
gotten
awful.
better at it, but it's
The most time consuming part, well, for a guy, it's not as hard, but for a woman, just getting physically into the character with the makeup and the hair and the clothes and doing all of that, it
I got to
takes
deal
like,
with that too.
yeah,
I
I
got to
guess
deal with
so.
that too. Do you think I
I
want to look
guess.
like this on camera? Oh, uh, I spend a certain amount of time trying not to look like a potato, but obviously I didn't put in that work for this show. But um,
Yeah, but
I,
no,
but it's
hair and
also
makeup takes
yeah.
time. It
And
does.
even for guys, you got to find something that's right to wear.
Yeah.
I can't wear this for Othello. Uh,
No.
uh, and what do you wear to audition for a part in Othello?
You wear a black turtleneck.
Yeah, well, that's pretty close. Um, so that's a real negative place, but it's not as negative for me as it is for people who don't get calls based on
Right.
things they've previously done.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
can pretty much work almost as much as I want without auditioning.
Right. That's
But
wonderful. And
I work a
you've
lot.
earned it. You've
Well,
earned it.
it's to me it's about 10% earn and about 90% good fortune. You know,
Mm.
I walked through that my literary agent's door at precisely the right second for him to introduce me to a woman who was walking by. And everything stemmed. 2 minutes earlier, 2 minutes later, you might be talking to Denzel Washington.
Well, wow. Jim. No, but I personally believe that there are no accidents and there are no mistakes, and that that was absolutely your destiny, and you that was meant to happen for you. That
Ripeness is all. You just got to be ready. You got
yeah,
to be ready when it happens.
that's right.
And
And you have to say yes to everything. You have to be willing. You have to show up, right? You can't be
well,
sitting in your house on the couch.
that's why I go off to St. Louis to do 2 days on a movie that cost, $30,000 to make. I don't know, maybe it costs 300,000. I have no idea. I don't pay much attention to that. But what I mean is, if I think I'm going to come home alive and somewhat artistically satisfied,
Mhm.
uh, I will go just to keep working.
And you also never know what's going to catch fire. You just don't
Sure.
know.
Yeah. One of the best jobs I ever had was on a little independent feature that had no money at all, called The Frontier. And I don't know, maybe I made $130 on it. I have no idea. But it was freezing, and my dressing room was a little cubby hole about the size of my laptop here. And I had the greatest time, and the picture came out fabulous. And I flew straight from that shoot to Toronto to do Crimson Peak for Guillermo del Toro, which the the catering budget for a single day was greater than the movie. And they were two of the best experiences I've ever had.
Wow.
So it's not, I like money. I'm perfectly happy for people to give me as much as they want to and more. But uh, I didn't get into this so that people would say hi to me on the street or so I could sign autographs. I got into it because I love this work. And whoever will let me do it and do it well and not kill me in the process, I want to work with them. So,
Well, I for one hope you have a lot more work ahead of you because I love watching you do it. And I'm going to be calling you to set up that lunch or coffee, whatever you're willing
okay.
to do. I would love to see you. It would be great to see you in person. It's been too long.
Yeah, I could use a hug.
And yeah, we don't do enough hugging anymore,
No,
right?
I
There's
know.
too much of this screen shit going on, and there's not enough hugging.
Yeah.
So I would love that. Jim, thank you so much for doing this. It was wonderful seeing you single dimensionally, but I look forward to the hug.
Is it possible we could do this again sometime and talk more about me?
I'll try. Next time I'll try harder.
Okay.